Cheers.
Cheers.
Nice. That's good. That hits the spot, man. Especially after all those burgers. Next time we should do like kind of deluxe burgers like kua'aina and stuff like that.
Yeah. But my only thing about that though is I actually think Japan makes good tasting burgers.
Yeah.
But I hate the burgers here because they're too tall.
Yeah, we talked about it in another episode. We're not going to talk about that today.
The taste is good. Like they know how to do. Japanese cooks know how to make smash burgers really good.
Yeah.
Where you just bam and just cook it up. Like that's good. It tastes nice.
Yeah. But today we're not going to talk about burgers. Today we're going to talk about
parenting
styles between the U.S. and Japan. And it was great because we were thinking about topics, and when we were thinking, oh, do you want to talk about parenting? You said, oh yeah, that'd be a great idea because actually this happened. And then we knew that this was going to be a good topic. Don't cheer. So I know this was actually requested by one of our AA Friends members. Thank you, friend, for requesting this. And this is actually something I've wanted to talk about a while because your wife is Japanese, my wife is Japanese, and parenting styles are different.
Yeah, for sure.
And so how would you feel? Like, what's the biggest difference, do you feel?
So I think the biggest difference, like when I look at parenting, is I think I'm not even going to say American. I think Western parenting, because this is all over Europe. Europe's like really into this too. They will intentionally let their kids fail and get hurt to teach them not to do something. Yeah. And so like, what do I mean by this, right? I'm going to give an example, and I'll give like a personal example, like with my daughter. So like, you have mom or dad in the kitchen cooking something and using the stove, and the stove is hot when you're cooking, right? And, I think here in Japan, if a kid walks up to the stove, usually the parent will be like, no, don't touch it. It's hot. Right. And I remember as a kid walking up to the stove and my mom just being like, hey, it's hot. And I just touched the stove and burned my hand. Yeah. And she's like, yep, I told you it's hot. Yeah. And a lot of Western families raise their kids like that.
Yeah. I mean, so the stove thing, I feel like is a little bit extreme because I don't want my son to get like burns to the point where I have to take him to the hospital or something. Yeah. But like the thing that makes me think about that is when I take my kids to the park. Yeah. And in where we live, there's like a park, and oh, man, can I just say I hate that none of the parks have grass here.
My park has lots of grass.
Well, I mean, so actually, the parks near where I live,
you just live in the city where it sucks.
No. The parks where I live, they have a lot of grass, which is nice. But I'm trying to make this more relatable to people in the city, Yeah. Because like around here, I remember when I used to live near the studio here, like there was this park near our house, and it was like this small little triangle of gravel.
Yeah.
But,
no, I know what you're talking about.
But the closest park near our house is a gravel park, one of those, and it's quite big. Yeah. And it's funny because like I have a son who's a year and a half year old, so Leo, right? And I remember there was this one time when he was like playing with a ball and he was kicking the ball. Yeah. And he was running and kicking the ball. And one time he ran to kick the ball, he missed it, and he ended up stepping on the ball and flipped back. Yeah. And fell down. And I was near him, and he was just like, huh? And I just walked over to him, and I was like, hey man, yeah, you kind of fell down. Why don't you get up? You know? And it was so funny because like there are other people at the park too, and like the moms who kind of know who he is, they were like watching me. Oh, he's so cute. And like when he fell down, like a mom just rushed over to like help him, like come down and like maybe help him get up. And I was just standing there, and be like, hey man, yeah, you fell down. I know you think you're gonna cry, but it's okay. You can just stand up. Yeah. And that was like, man, parenting styles are so different because they're like helping my kids more than I'm helping my kids.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I had a situation where there was a toddler play area. So like I don't want to dox myself where I live.
Dox myself.
But there's a toddler play area in this kind of community center in my park, right? And so inside the toddler play area is like this designated area with like all these building blocks and various toys and stuff. And that area is like right next to the little kid area where it's like 5 to 8.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's going to be like a lot of like overlap, like those kids will come into the toddler play area and like mess around. And so I took my daughter there and she was playing in that area. And it's really funny. My daughter's like completely fearless. She just walks up to people and starts playing with them.
How old is she now?
She's a year and a half this month. And like it terrifies kids, first of all. like other kids here just hate having her come up and play with them. They're just like, who are you? Get away, yada.
Yeah.
And it's really funny. But so like all these bigger kids will come over and they'll be playing, and my daughter sees them and wants to go play with them too. And like these kids are like full on roughhousing, right? Especially like there was a couple boys mixed in the group. Yeah. And like they're like throwing blocks. Yeah. And this one boy is like standing on this like cylindrical block thing, right? And trying to like log roll on it. Yeah. Where he's like trying to stand on it. Yeah. And he slips off of it and full on just like body slams my daughter onto the ground. And everyone was like, oh! And I was like, whatever. Yeah. Maybe don't stand next to that kid next time. Yeah. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So did she cry?
No.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of thing where it's just like, hey, learn some self-awareness. Like, that kid's being dumb. Like maybe don't stand next to the dumb kid next time. Yeah. And it's like that kind of mentality.
Yeah. I feel like in the United States, like the biggest goal that as parents you get, I wouldn't say obsessed with, but the main goal that you're thinking about is, how can I help my child become independent? Yeah. And kind of live on their own.
Yeah. And to extend on that, how can I make my kid tougher? Right? Yeah. That's like a really big thing in Western cultures, like being tough. Yeah. Like it doesn't matter boy or girl. It's like being tough. Yeah. Like, I can handle this, like to kind of compare it with some other countries. Like, I know in like Sweden and Norway, it's really common for moms while they're going to cafes to leave their baby outside in the freezing snow. Have you heard about this?
Yeah, I've heard about that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the mentality
in the baby carriage.
Yeah. In the baby carriage. And the mentality and the belief behind it. And I don't know if this is true or not, but this is what people believe is it'll make the baby more immune to sickness. Yeah. Right. It's like the baby's becoming adapted to the cold. Yeah. Basically.
Well, it's funny because, for me too, like I always felt it was really weird when I see parents obsessing over their kids' clothes, making sure they don't get even the least bit cold. Yeah. And just like putting layers and layers and layers on them because, if my kid gets cold, he's going to get sick and he might die. So we need to make sure he has all these clothes on. And where I'm like, hey, Lewis is shivering a little bit. My older son. Yeah. Lewis is shivering. Maybe he's a little bit cold, but it's okay. I mean, he's developing thick skin to deal with the cold, Yeah.
So I think that's like a really big mixed or a really big difference in the parenting styles here. Another big one that I participate in is, especially with like young kids, but this can go all the way up to like junior high, is parents often sleep with their kids here.
Yeah. Yeah. And to be honest, this is actually a habit that I quite like actually now.
I've gotten used to it. I don't know how it's going to be when Luna gets older. Yeah. I don't know. I'm still not really super okay with that, but my daughter sleeps with us and I don't know. I'm used to it. I get woken up all the time though. Yeah. Like I've had really bad sleep for like the past 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that because like I remember, because this goes back to like in the States, you really want your kid to become independent. Yeah. So it's almost unthinkable for them to sleep in the same bed as you. They must sleep alone. They must be by themselves. You must teach them how to do that. And
that's from like newborn.
Yeah, from newborn.
Like it's not even like, okay, they're 1 year old. They're going to go sleep in it. No, it's like parents will put newborns in another room.
Yeah. And we call you call sleeping with your kid, the official term is co-sleeping. And actually co-sleeping is starting to catch on in some communities in the United States. And actually on Facebook, I see sometimes I see posts about co-sleeping, and there are always people who are like, you know what, you might fall asleep and roll over your kid and kill them. Or like the other one's like, yeah, you're going to teach them to be a baby. And it's like,
I mean, if you're like 900 pounds and like taking up the entire bed, that might be a thing. Yeah. But I think most normal people like,
well, so in America, what is it? Sudden infant death syndrome is like is a big thing. And so people are like, oh yeah, they're going to wake up dead. And then other people are saying, but they wake up in the baby beds, dead too, Yeah. But what was interesting for me though is we did co-sleeping with my son Lewis from the beginning. We didn't do that with Leo. And now that Leo is really close to being 2, he's starting to develop more separation anxiety, that my wife is starting to sleep in the same bed as him. Yeah. But like one thing that I think is interesting, kind of like just the mindset about parenting is fundamentally different, because in America, I feel like the base relationship is the husband and the wife. And they're the progenitors of the family. They're the center. Yeah. And so the bed is a sacred place. So you don't let
mom
kids
and dad's
in.
area.
Yeah. Like I remember seeing a post being like, your kids sleep in your bed? How do you have sex?
It's like, that's a good question. It's a good question.
I mean, you can have sex other places.
I mean,
we don't want to get into that, but no, but it's like, but it's just funny because it's like the bed is the holy place, and that's where like the relationship lives. Yeah. You can't invite your children in there because that's gross, because this is like the relation between you and your wife. And also, when I first came to Japan and I learned that a lot of times wives stop sleeping in the same bed as their husbands and they sleep with their children, I was like, man,
I'd never be okay with that.
They just destroyed the whole thing. But now Lewis has his own room. So my wife and we take turns sleeping with Lewis in his room, and one person sleeps in the big comfortable bed, It helps us get our sleep and stuff, but I'm okay with it.
Yeah. No, I like whatever works for your family, but it's like for me, when it comes to relationships, like my home is where my wife is. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to be away from my wife.
Yeah, I mean, me too. I get that. I totally get that. But I feel like in Japanese households, when kids come into the picture, the kid becomes the center, not the relationship, but the kids become the center. Yeah. And so everything gets focused around that. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. It's just a different thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's aspects of it I like. So one of the things that I really like about parenting here in Japan is how active parents are in their kid's life. Mm-hmm. And like you might be wondering, like, okay, well, what do you mean by that, Austin? So like you see moms personally preparing bentos here.
And it's like a big thing.
It's a big thing. Yeah. And it's kind of, there's a point of pride in it. Like from the mom's point of view, like I'm preparing my child's bento and I'm preparing a healthy meal for them and I'm taking care of them. Yeah. Compared to, American parents who like, they'll get like a Lunchables, or it's like, here's some sandwich and a bag of chips and a Capri Sun.
Actually, that's really interesting because so in the States, you have Lunchables, which are basically like bentos that you can buy. Yeah. But I've never really heard of a parent like buying a bento at a store and just giving it to their kid the next day.
You never hear about that. Yeah. Now, I will say that like once they get into like junior high and high school, like a lot of kids will just go buy bento. Yeah. But I would say it's still the vast majority of kids that I see at my school are still eating home cooked bentos. Yeah. Like it's such a big thing here that if you're not doing it, you're one of the minorities.
Yeah, right.
Right?
Yeah.
So I really like that. I like that I like how involved parents are with the school here. Mm-hmm. So you see this more in like, I would say like nursery school and elementary school, but like pretty much like any kind of like event at the school, there's always parent volunteers that are like going there and really actively participating. Where, I mean, you still see some of that in the US, but it's not the same.
Yeah, I feel like there's more like. Did you guys eat dinner together as a family a lot?
Yeah.
Okay, you did?
Yeah.
Yeah, because
every night.
Once I got into like middle school, we kind of stopped that big time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I grew up in my family, and like my mom was really adamant on us sitting at the dinner table, and my dad was like, no, screw that. Let's go sit at the couch. And
yeah.
But we ate dinner together every night. Yeah.
Well, that's good. Yeah. I feel like in America, because you have such an emphasis on independence that the parents kind of have more independence from their kids.
Yeah.
Like I feel like in Japan, your kids get kind of mad. It's like a Play-Doh ball where you have like a new color that you just smash in and you mix up, but you can't really take it out anymore. No. Whereas like in America, it's almost like they're stacked blocks together.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah. Yeah. I think I would agree with that. Because like here in Japan, it's like you have dinner.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That's just it. You eat meals with your family.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like parents here. That's another thing. Like parents here are a lot more adamant on their kid coming home for dinner time.
Yeah.
And like being around during dinner time. And that's at such an extent that dinner time will sometimes get placed at a later time at night to like kind of match up what time like people get home.
Yeah, right.
As opposed in the US, it's like, you didn't show up for dinner. It's like,
it's fine. We have leftovers. You can eat those.
You get leftovers, or like I'll order pizza or something for you. You know what I mean? It's like, it's just there's not that much importance on like sitting down and being together.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Hey guys, if you've watched this far, you're gonna love our Austin and Arthur friends.
In the Austin and Arthur friends, you're going to really improve your English listening, and I mean a lot.
Yeah. So for each episode, you'll get English and Japanese subtitles, so you can check your listening and comprehension.
You'll also get access to a members-only community where you can talk with us, the both of us. Mainly me, right?
No, definitely not. For more info, click on the link here, or in the description box of this video.
Thanks for being our friend.
Woo!
I have no friends. Yeah, I think so. So one thing that's kind of something that actually has really happened to me in only the past few years. So my older son, he's born in August, so he's going to be 5 next year. But so just past couple of years, he's still 4. But I really want. He's a very strong boy, and he has a very strong will. It's great, and I want him to become strong and independent because, I feel like in America, because it's kind of like dog eat dog. We have this thing that if you don't learn how to compete, you don't learn how to be strong, you're just gonna fail. Yeah. And so there were times when I was a little bit rough with him, or times I was a little bit like stern with him, but like, hey, no, we're doing this now. I don't want like for bath time, right? Like, okay, bath time's now. He's like, no, I want to watch some. No, bath time. And I was kind of keepy with him a little bit. I was a little bit rough with him. Rough and
I mean, bath time is bath time. I'm right there with you. It's we're doing a bath right now. We don't wait for this.
And then there would be times when he would be like, oh, I don't want to put my clothes on. Like we're like, no, you can put your clothes on. And he's like, Daddy, you do it. I'm like, no, you do it. You can do it. And I just sit there and like it'd get like pretty high tension because I wanted him to develop this independence. But what the past past couple months, I've really become softer with him, and I've done a lot more things for him, like putting his clothes on and stuff like that. And when he says no at first, instead of saying no, I said we're doing it, you're going to do it. I would be more softer with him. Not being as like harsh the way I was saying it. And I can almost like see my mom right there being like, oh man, you're raising that kid to be a brat. Because when I saw my wife talk to my son like that, I'm like, oh man, you're raising that kid to be a brat. I don't want to raise a brat. He doesn't listen because of that. But what I found is that like he listens to me a lot more. Like at the beginning when I was still gentle with him, he still kind of like said no a lot. Now he like does almost whatever I say all the time, and I've been so gentle with him. Like I pull back, and it's kind of like made me thinking, maybe I don't have to push him so hard to be independent. It's just it's actually quite a very emotional thing for me.
Yeah, Yeah, man, it definitely sounds like it. I think I'll probably have a moment like that when my daughter's your son's age.
Yeah, but I feel like for you and me, like not to give out details, but I feel like your mom and my mom were kind of similar in that they were like, "Hey, let's do this." Like, no, and like, really? We're doing this. You know?
Oh, dude.
Yeah.
My mom was a very loving, is a very loving person.
She's still alive.
Yeah. She's a very loving person. And, you know, she's done, she's always been really kind, but man, when it came to discipline, like, you know, like I'll give you an example. Dinner time. I didn't like vegetables when I was a kid. And so like we would get like mashed potatoes and gravy, and usually like a side of pork, and like green beans or broccoli, right? That would be like a regular dinner at my house. And I didn't like any of that except for the pork. Yeah. So I would just eat the pork, and then I wouldn't eat like the vegetables and the potatoes and gravy. And my mom would be like, "No, you're not leaving this table." And when she said I'm not leaving the table, like it'll be like 10 or 11 o'clock at night and I'll still be at the table and be like, "Nope, you're not finished. Yeah. You don't get to go to bed until that plate's done." Man. You know what I mean? And it's like that kind of stuff I think is very American.
Yeah, it is very American.
Like, I said you're doing this and you're doing it. Yeah. Like, yeah. You know?
Yeah, you know, it's funny that you mentioned that because, you know, on the one hand, you want to raise your kids to be independent, free thinkers, living, deciding for themselves. Also, but then you have these rules of like, you must follow what I say. And it's almost like those are in conflict with each other, you know? Yeah. Because I talk about how like, oh, I want my son to be independent. I want him to think for himself, and I want him to act based on his instincts. Like, and I want him to have confidence in that. And then when he does that and says no, I'm like,
You want him to think freely, but you want him to make the decisions that you want him to make. Yeah. You know, I get it. Yeah. You know, another thing that just popped in my head that I think is really different is when kids graduate and turn 18. This is becoming less common in America, but it's still pretty common. There's an assumption that you are going to get kicked out of your parents' house. Yeah. Like, get out.
Not necessarily kicked out, but you're going to leave your parents' house.
But in a lot of instances, I do mean kicked out. Okay. It's like, you're graduated college. We've supported you for 18 years now. Go support yourself. Yeah. That's a really common mentality among parents in America. And it's becoming less common because it's just, honestly,
society's getting softer.
Well, I mean, yeah, I would say that, but I think more so is this, like, you can't really live by yourself these days. Yeah. You can't make any money. Like, minimum wage, you can't afford to live in an apartment on minimum wage. It's not something you can do.
Yeah, dude, but you can get a roommate. Here is it okay, so we could talk about this another thing, but like, I don't know, maybe because, you know, I mean, I know you've had you've fallen on rough times in your life too, but I've been on like the brink of homelessness a couple times when I was younger. And what did I do? I got roommates.
Pulled yourself up by your bootstraps, and you just
made it work. Though.
Made it work with a small loan of $1 million.
Yeah. You know, I worked my butt off, and my dad gave me $100,000, and I was able to make it. You can too. No, because my dad didn't give me any money, so that's why it was really tough. I know a lot of people talk about that, but like this whole thing about like, oh, it's too hard to live on your own. No, you can get roommates and you can live in the area. Yeah, it's okay.
I mean, it's true. You can live in the projects. You can live in a really crappy apartment. But I think a lot of people want to just live in a normal area, and you can't live in like suburban areas.
Yeah,
these days.
Yeah, but here's the thing, right? If you want to live that normal life, you have to contribute so that you get paid enough to live that way. Otherwise, if you're not contributing enough,
but you didn't have to though. You could do that with minimum wage in the past. I think that's the thing that people are upset about. No, you know what I mean?
I get it. I don't know. This is a whole new.
But
topic.
We're going off track. But the interesting thing though is here in Japan, it's like unthinkable for an 18-year-old to just go off and start a life. It's like, what do you haven't been to college, you haven't had a career, you don't even know how to live by yourself.
Yeah.
And like pretty much kids will often go off and live by themselves or live with friends while they're in college. But I would say it's probably like still more common for them to live with their parents and then like kind of just go do stuff all the time. But it's very common for people to live with their parents until they get married. Especially women. I would say more so women than men, but it's still like, I know a lot of guys who are in their late 20s that live with their parents still. Like here in Japan. And there's not as much of a stigma as there is in the US. Like if you're like 29, especially if you're a guy, if you're like 29 years old and you still live with your parents, it's like, dude, you're a freaking loser.
Yeah, you're a loser.
Right? Yeah. That's the stigma, right?
Yeah, and I mean it's funny because like I feel like in the States, because once again, you want your kids to be independent, but then there's like expectations on what your life is going to look like, you know?
Because I sorry to interrupt you. I'm just thinking about like, I moved to Japan when I was 27 and I kind of lived in my parents' house like off and on while I was going to school. So I remember being like 25 or 26 and I would go out on a date with a girl and then I would like mention that I lived at home and she would be like, oh,
the date is dead.
Okay. Well, see ya.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just like the idea of you living with your family.
Yeah.
You know,
because you're supposed to be independent, you know?
Yeah.
But what's funny though is that, I mean, I feel like, you know, we've talked about this, I think, in other episodes, but I feel like in the United States, there are really strong preconceived notions about how you should be, how the world should be. Whereas in Japan, on the outside, there's a huge like conformist element to things, but there's less of that kind of societal expectation. Oh, you need to be married with kids or like have this, because I mean, it depends on the person.
Oh, I know. I think the complete opposite.
Well, I mean, but I guess what I'm talking about in this case of like, oh, you should be living by yourself. You should be your own person, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. I think, and maybe if I phrase it this way, you might agree with me on this, but I think here in Japan, there's a huge societal expectation on what you should be at a certain age. But I think families are very open to what their kids pursue. Like even if their kid decides to be a NEET and to stay home and play video games all day, like a lot of parents here are okay with that.
Right.
Like, oh, it's okay. That's just who they are.
Yeah.
Whereas in the US, I don't think there's a lot of societal expectations, but there's a lot of like family expectations.
Yeah,
right?
I like how you say society versus family. The levels are different. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that makes sense because it's like in the United States, you have a kid who's like 29, 30.
Yeah.
They're still living at home. Kick them out.
Well, I mean, if you think about the culture of America and you think about where we came from, we have what's called the American dream. And what the American dream is, I'm going to make a better life for my children than the life I had. And half of that expectation is you as a parent making a better life for your kid.
Yeah.
But also the second half of that expectation is your kid then taking the mantle and doing the same thing.
Right, exactly.
Right? And so you can't do that if you're just, you know, a NEET.
Yeah, right.
at home playing video games and stuff. So it's, it comes from that mentality.
Yeah.
Where I think here in Japan, families kind of look at each other and go, okay, well, we just want to make sure like our family's together and happy.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's funny because, you know, this goes back to when, I think last year when we were visiting the States, remember we were playing at the playground there near our house, and Lewis was doing what he always does. My 4-year-old Lewis is doing what he always does, which was he finds a kid he likes, just follows him around the playground, you know? And he plays with them. Even if they don't want him to, he just plays with them.
Yeah.
But what was funny is, you know, the other kid wasn't saying anything, wasn't really even paying attention to him, but Lewis was like kind of following him around and stuff.
Yeah.
And my dad was like, dude, Arthur, you got to tell Lewis to stop. Like, he's bothering that kid. He's going to cause a problem. You got to tell him to stop. And I'm like, no, you know, Dad, if the kid doesn't want Lewis to do that, he's going to say something and they're going to work it out there, you know?
Yeah.
Because it didn't happen yet, you know?
Sure.
But it was almost like, and like I also see at home, not specific things with my mother, but I see expectations of what kind of a person my son should be. And when he misses that, it's like, oh no, that's bad. We need to put him into what we think he should be.
Yeah.
But that's not necessarily the only way that people live, but that's their idea of how he should live, you know?
Yeah. Oh man, dude, the amount of times I don't really get this because I just don't go back to the US, but I know I might stir up some family drama here, but I'm just
Austin loves I think he loves everyone in his family. He loves at least most of you guys.
I definitely love everyone in my family. But like I remember there was a lot of controversy between family members and my sister when she's still raising her kids. Like they're teenagers now, but especially when they were younger, there was like, oh, they need to be doing this. They need to be doing this. Oh, you're making that decision? I don't know if that's a good idea. That kind of thing. And it's so common in the US. Family members will be criticizing each other. Like, I don't think they're raising that kid right. You see that everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. It's like everyone is like so involved.
Yeah. But involved in like controlling.
Yeah.
Not involved in like participating.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you shouldn't do that. Yeah, man. I feel like this was really good. I'm glad we could talk about this.
This is a good topic.
I'm surprised we haven't talked about this earlier, but yeah, we still haven't decided the next topic, but we will decide that soon. If you guys have any ideas, if you guys have any topics you want us to talk about, let us know in the comments below and we will check them out.
See ya.
All right.